I'm with Joseph Kopser now, an Army veteran, entrepreneur, and investor. Long ties to Austin, but he's actually been on the front lines of what's happening with innovation and trying to figure out some guardrails with where we go in terms of this innovation and defense tech and other things. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's an important topic.
Innovation is moving so quickly. So how do we balance the innovation and where AI is going? Some people fear that AI is going to take over for humans, and making sure we stay competitive and not put too many guardrails, but actually have a path forward.
Yeah, it's what you asked is the most important question of the day. But I would argue that the answer lies not just in the future, but the answer lies in the past. It's an understanding of how a free society, of one like the United States, incubates innovation, fosters it and cradles it, and yet at the same time, because our country is a nation of laws and respect for law and rule of law, we protect things like intellectual property, protect IP. So we're able to have all these amazing entrepreneurs that are building all these amazing products, more so than any other country on the planet. But at the same time, those very same people today, for instance, in the world of AI, as you're talking about, are building things that are so powerful, not just in terms of the resources they use like energy and water, but they're so powerful that even the developers don't even know the full potential of where it's going. The number one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is, first of all, not panic. And then second of all, maintain transparency about what's going on, what's under the hood. And if we do those two things well, not panic and maintain transparency, we'll be fine in the long term. Now, there will be huge job displacement. There'll be concerns among people that we need to work as a community together rather than use it as an issue to divide.
You know, you have these dual-use companies starting so quickly in Central Texas. You have companies like Crossbow, AEON, Saronic, even AEON building, these housing for barracks here and working on the moon, which is wild. And they're all, some of these industries are using technology to create some very powerful weapons. I guess it's, are we thinking about the consequences of what we're building, do you think?
Well, the good news is we are thinking about it. What allows me to retain hope, and I'm not going to be in some doomsday scenario like the Terminator, is that the very people that are on the cutting lines are surrounded by hundreds, if not tens of thousands of engineers and people working on it. And you will hear occasionally complaints or gripes. The most famous case recently was Anthropic telling the Department of Defense, hey, you can't use our technologies for autonomous and what we call human in the loop, where a human makes a decision, to have decisions made with a human not in the loop. They didn't want any part of that. And so that cost a big dust up. But more importantly, what it cost, because it was full transparency, was a good conversation for society to have about what are the rules and the limits, who should be involved in some of those decision-making processes.
It's really so hard to keep up these days. And we have people in their garages making technology that is really mind-blowing.
Yep.
And it's exciting and I think scary at the same time. We have Paradromics here doing brain implants, and we have Phantom Neuro helping people with robotic arms.
And that's amazing. Yeah.
And it's going to change people's lives, for the better. As we move forward, defending the next 250, are we in a good spot in terms of America's competitiveness?
So we are in a good spot for the America's Next 250. There are some things, though, that are a little troubling out there, and I'll give people indicators of what to look for. So first of all, things like artificial intelligence and the data centers needed to power them. I just wrote recently with a thing I do called US Tomorrow, which is a regular newsletter about these kind of issues. And we know the data centers are going to use a lot of energy and they're going to use a lot of water. We also knew that about fracking 15 years ago. And in the early days of fracking, for environmental reasons, a lot of people did not want fracking. And they were right for the reasons that many of them were upset about. However, if done correctly, if done in tandem between industry and elected officials and community input, we now have a fracking, it's been almost 15 years now, fracking success. We brought down the price of natural gas. That has allowed coal to no longer be a source of power for most providers. And so we have cleaned up the environment better than coal. And the parallel to the data centers is almost exactly the same. So what do I mean by that? So if you move a data center into a small town that doesn't want it, you're going to have friction from day one. But if you can move into a small town and say, look, you have the land, you have the wind, you have the water, you have all of the natural resources for us to build a self-contained island, if you will, of a data center where we not only produce our own energy, we store it and we use our own energy. And when we have excess energy, we can give it back to you, back electricity. Small towns can have free electricity, as well as the companies know that water is a scarce resource, especially in Texas, that they can develop themselves new technologies to use water more efficiently. And if we go with a win-win scenario, industry works with elected officials who work with community, we can power that technology you're talking about in a more nuanced way. What I'm worried about, though, is the Chinese or the Russians or anybody that doesn't want us to be doing that, to be once again meddling in our social media, to be meddling again in our politics, to create division where there isn't division, but we're just manufacturing it for reasons that don't help society. So long term, I'm excited about it. Short term, I'm nervous that we'll lose our competitive edge if we make short-term decisions that hurt us in the long term.
So in the short term, do we have enough collaboration right now? Do we have enough transparency? And do we have enough real communication to say, look, we're on the same page? Everybody's worried about, this is a money grab or the big high-tech people are going to take all the money and ruin these towns. But are those things there, transparency, collaboration, and communication?
So to be honest right now, no. A lot of the very big tech companies I'm talking about, Facebook, Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, the ones that are on the cutting edge of what we call frontier models. They're developing the AI right now that's doing some amazing work that most people see in their daily lives if they're playing with AI. Those companies right now just need to revamp their public relations and to think about how they do this. Luckily, there are some really great people here in the Austin energy community that are joining some of these big companies, I think, to kind of help that. They're energy experts. They know how to build out these facilities. But no, right now, if I was just wanting to provide for my family, put food on the table, and I'm hearing some of these CEOs talking about job losses and technology booms and the rich getting richer, I'd be against it too.
I think Texas is different.
Yes.
I feel like we have, streamlined the process to support the innovation. The governor really wants to bring the innovation here, working with the companies. You have Elon Musk planting his flag here. You have, some people love him or hate him, but it's one of those things you can't deny the innovation and the change that is happening. Do you think Texas is leading the way when it comes to the future of innovation?
Yes, Texas is not only leading the way on innovation, but specifically to your series on defending the next 250, we are uniquely positioned, Texas, Central Texas especially, more than any other spot in the country, to lead on smart, ethical, effective, dual-use innovation. And the reason why is a couple of factors, and this was very true 15 years ago when I showed up and I kind of saw the ingredients. So first and foremost, you have in Texas a beacon. It's like this big giant beacon that says, if you're a veteran, come move here. You can confirm my statistics. They're up and down a little bit every year, but for people leaving the military, Texas, for all kinds of reasons, is the destination of choice. They weren't even maybe like me. I wasn't even born in Texas, but I chose Texas. And that's happening on a huge scale, generation after generation now. I'm in the 15th year of being involved in defense innovation here, and I've seen this continue and, in fact, accelerate. That's number one. Number two, you also, in Central Texas especially, have access to some major military facilities. So you have Fort Hood up the road, barely an hour drive, is one of the largest collection of military vehicles and personnel anywhere in the free world, and they're in our backyard. You have right across the street the home of the Texas Army National Guard and Air Guard right here. And that is, we battle back and forth with California, who's the biggest guard, but we have a huge group of individuals who are both not only soldiers and airmen, but they're also in the tech sector. They're also in business. So they have that dual use, if you will, themselves. And then thirdly, you also have down south of us, Fort Sam Houston, Military City, USA. So you have this unbelievable ecosystem from I-35, in the Killeen area, all the way down through Austin, all the way down through San Antonio. It's unprecedented, just the number of military and veterans. But wait, there's more, like a ShamWow commercial. The other thing that makes us so fantastic is we're anchored by not just the University of Texas, which is a premier world-class research university as well, one of the largest alumni in all of the United States. But right up the road, barely an hour's drive, we have Texas A&M, which has contributed greatly, not only into research in the dual-use area, but also the number of people who graduate from A&M, stay in Central Texas somewhere, and so put them together. So you have veterans, you have the military, you have world-class university, and then the last ingredient, which you alluded to, with people that have come here that are already innovators. Austin was already an innovative town. There's story after story about decade after decade we reinvent ourselves. The defense innovation scene being so public is only new in the last 10, 15 years because all those ingredients came together at the same time, and a lot of people have been working purposefully to facilitate that. And that's why Texas will remain a leader in defense innovation more so than any other part of the country.
And the Army Applications Lab.
Yes.
I mean,
there are nearly 17 organizations now: Army Applications Lab, Army Software Factory, T2Com, as we now call it, formerly Army Futures Command. You have AFWorks. You have, again, I could list all 17, but 17 different federally recognized, and they're not all military. Some of them bleed over into other agencies, three-letter organizations, like we like to call them, who want to be here because there are people doing cutting-edge technology with a service and purpose mind that's hard to find at a lot of other places in the country.
And the ecosystem that is drawing these veterans is pretty amazing. You have the Luke Fishers of the world and SkyFi technology. You have Saronic with just the ethos of saying, you know, we're going to hire veterans. You have ACS, Allen Control Systems, that is also integrating veterans into the system. And you have people that are trying to defend our war fighters because they were on the front lines and say, hey, we need to do it better, but we need to do it faster than the military because they're way too slow.
Who knows better than a veteran who has served in war to know just how far behind we still are in a lot of areas? And frankly, that was my origin story for me. So graduating from West Point in 1993, I was an aerospace engineer. So I was a little bit nerdy, a little bit techie. But in my 7 years in the Army, I saw just how far behind, especially around computers, the Army was. And sure enough, right in Fort Hood, Texas, I was a young company commander, had about 110 soldiers or so in our command, and we were given the mission to field and test, which basically means install in our tanks these new systems, which basically are nothing more than GPS in a tank. It's hard to even believe we had vehicles without GPS, but we did. And we were among the very first units ever in the Army to field these. And I saw the human dimension of, well, this is the way we used to always do it, clash with we have to do better in the future. When those two come together, that's where innovation either grinds, in a bad way, or after you kind of unstick the gears that got stuck, then great things happen out of it. So you take that, you fast forward the clock to 2004, now I'm in Iraq, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this war is not going anywhere near like we thought it was supposed to be going. And even worse, I personally saw how old and ancient our energy technologies are. Now you think, what's the big deal about an old generator? Well, that old generator, especially the bigger ones that were wet stacking because they were the wrong type for the wrong mission. Wet stacking means it's throwing off oil and it's basically producing more electricity than is needed, but we didn't have the technology to regulate it. So imagine this. We're taking soldiers, having them drive fuel tankers through the open, scary deserts of Iraq where bad guys are just waiting to shoot at them. They're not shooting at our tanks. They're shooting at our fuel tankers. And that just made me furious that we're the greatest nation in the world. We're using energy technologies from the 60s and 70s, and so we can do better. So for me, that was my origin story, and that's why I've been so passionate about Austin being the place where we can do better. And now to see all the companies you just listed being a part of this, well, it just makes my day because, again, to your point, nobody knows better what the warfighter needs than former warfighters like us who are now trying to move into the private sector and build these systems.
On that note, you know what is ethical in war and in innovation. How much is that being baked in to the change that is happening with what we're making?
Yeah, well, the good news is I still hold a lot of faith in our professional military. And what I mean by professional military is when you raise your right hand in service to the country, you are serving the Constitution, and the idea is much bigger than one particular person, one particular era, one particular decade. And so it's timeless. And we in uniform in the military, from our very first days in basic training or officer training, are inculcated really with this belief that we have to follow a certain set of laws. And they're really pretty simple, which is you can't do anything that's illegal, you can't do anything that's immoral, and you can't do anything that's unethical. And if you're faced with one of those three things, it is your responsibility to be the whistleblower. I've had to do it a couple of times in my own career, and I know a lot of people who I serve with in their own moments needed that kind of courage to stand up. And so that takes us to today. AI, all these new things, all these new weapon systems, and when people see and think of weapon systems, they think of the negative side of them, but I love to remind folks that there is the positive side, the defensive angle. So bad guys are always going to shoot at us. So a missile developed here in Austin could easily shoot down one of those missiles. Now, could that technology also be used as an offensive weapon? It sure could, but that's why I like to put my faith in the military that we have today to be able to make the decisions. Is it illegal, unethical, or immoral?
So they're talking about the guardrails while trying to compete.
Yes.
Yeah. And some people fear that the Chinas of the world aren't.
Oh, they have no gumption. They don't care. I mean, they've got, hundreds of thousands, if not more, of their own citizens or people within their boundaries that are in prisons, human rights violations all over the place. So I don't ever want to get into a situation where I am playing with one hand tied behind my back, but still, whether it's the Geneva Convention or if it's just the right thing to do, there's just certain things that the U.S. military should never engage in.
How much fun are you having now? You have a foot in both sides?
Yeah. So I'm having more fun than I'm allowed for a couple of reasons. Number one, many of the students that I taught both at West Point and at the University of Texas are now in senior leadership positions in our military. And so for me, it's this, I don't even know how to, it's almost like this, I'm not a grandfather, but it's almost like this grandfather feeling to see them all grown up doing so well. These young men and women today, your military, I'll tell all your viewers and listeners, your military is in a good place today because of so many great Americans. Because we are an all-volunteer army, they just keep showing up, and it's fabulous. The other reason why I love being in this scene is I'm so proud of what Austin and the larger Central Texas community can be when they come together. Because when Secretary Carter, I think it was in 2016 timeframe, please check my math, but when he came here to Austin looking for a group of people who understood that our military needs technology, it needs innovation, and it needs to go faster. I just, by pure coincidence, happened to have been a student of his at Harvard 15 years before when the Army sent me to graduate school to get me better, faster, smarter, as best they could. And so when he walked into town to say, I need to find an innovative community to put DIUX, which is Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, we, the Austin community, were already practiced, if you will, in that kind of work because 3 years before, I had helped to co-found the Defense Energy Summit, which in its first year brought in like the commanding general of 1st Cavalry Division, the commanding general of 1st Armored Division. We were bringing in the senior leaders from the Pentagon who were looking at energy and operational warfighter effectiveness, and we did it at the campus of the University of Texas just because we could. And it was like the first time we ever got them together. So 3 years later, by the time Ash Carter showed up, the Chamber of Commerce really understood the opportunity. The mayor's office was behind it 100%. There's a great photo of Ash Carter there for a meeting at the Capitol Factory, which is a great incubator for all this. And I'm sitting across the table from him, and we've got the chancellor at the time of the UT system, the war hero, Admiral McCraven, to my left, and to my right, the state senator, now mayor of Austin, Kirk Watson. And that was 11, 10, 12 years ago, whatever the math is. And so that's just an example of you not only have to have veterans, an innovative community, but you have to have an ecosystem, and Austin, Texas has that ecosystem.
And they're buying in. And
they're not only buying in, but they're going out of their way to help these companies, like you described earlier, thrive in this environment. Icon is, one of my favorite stories. Aptronic is another great story. I mean, I don't want to state name and names like a wedding rehearsal because I'll leave somebody out, but it's so exciting to see. And even companies I've been a part of, like Sustainment, trying to help build the supply chain in a more effective way. Because if we're going to build 82,000 new widgets, we need to be able to find ways to get machine shops and other suppliers to be able to know where to buy them from. We found that out in COVID when we needed ventilators.
Masks.
And masks. Who the hell makes them?
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, I'm having more fun than I'm allowed.
Tell me about your political aspirations. What was it like for you to run a campaign?
Yeah, well, so for me, running a campaign was just a further extension of public service. So once you go to West Point, once you serve in the Army for 20 years, you're always kind of itching to make sure that you're helping in your community. And so for my way, I just saw it as an extension of helping. So in 2018, I ran for Congress, came this close to winning, but that didn't deter me from staying involved. So another organization I have that's involved in politics and community is called U.S. Tomorrow. And the purpose of U.S. Tomorrow is to remind people we have more in common than that what separates us. I highlight a lot of stories in business and the community of different things going on that are examples of folks working together. And you can already tell the theme here, it's collaboration. And so I don't spend too much time or worry with the political wonks on the extremes that are just there to hear themselves talk or cause division and trouble. And then just recently I ran for the Texas state legislature, and voters said, no, we're looking for someone less. Well, I ran as a centrist is the easiest way to describe it. And they said, no, thank you. And I said, that's okay. I'll keep working.
Well, you know Texas.
Yes.
You know, but I see you on the front lines. I see you advocating for communities and companies and a better Texas.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's one of those things, it gets in your DNA, even if you're not from Texas.
Yep.
You buy in, you realize how special this community is, especially Austin. Yeah. Are you hopeful for the future?
100%. 100%. So I have 3 daughters who are 31, 28, 26. They're getting old enough now that I should probably stop saying how old they are. They won't appreciate it. But I'm not only hopeful for them, but I'm hopeful because I'm also a student of history. And every time you look backwards in history of when we had one of these moments where we invented electricity, and what will that do? We invented motor transportation. What will that do? We invented the internet. We invented all these technologies, like the earliest one, fire. We can either use it for good to cook food, or we can use it for bad to, burn down your village. We've always had these issues, this constant tension between new technologies provide new opportunities, but new technologies also can be used for ill and for bad. And so for me, it's just always staying a part of the community that's trying to figure out how we take advantage of the good, learn from the past, and not let it fall into the wrong hands. In fact, the book I wrote with my co-author, Brett Boyd, a business partner of mine, we talked, the entire first chapter is about how change works, because his experiences, my experiences, both in the military and the private sector, and this book was not written as a policy book or even as a business book. It was just kind of a book on how innovation impacts community. And we gave lots of examples in the past of people who got it right and got it wrong. But the only thing that we tried to impress upon everybody is nobody gets the future right. But if you remain hopeful, which is your question, you have a better chance of getting it right. So that's what I'm doing.
And as we approach the next 250, I am very optimistic about what I'm seeing through my Tech This Out reports and talking to the people at Capital Factory. And they're doing things that we couldn't do 5 years ago, but with AI.
Right.
So it's really exciting to see. Anything I didn't ask or you think is important to say as we move to the next 250?
Yeah, so I think as we look to the next 250, we've got to figure out how, and it's funny that we brought up politics earlier, but we've really got to try to get our politics out of so much of this innovation that we're doing. And I understand the concerns of people, and I certainly understand concerns around AI, around job loss. But if we just look at going back 100, 150 years, the quality of life of people worldwide, about the number of people that were in poverty, the number of people that lacked any formal education or even the ability to read, all of those will be able to be overcome as they have so much between capitalism, democracy, and technology innovation to lift people from where they are. And so as we go forward, I just want your viewers, listeners, and even on your podcast too, to know that there is always going to be change. Change is constant. And if there's one thing that people like less than anything, it's change. And that's like this crazy dichotomy. And I speak to audiences all the time. I work with boards of directors and companies. And I try to make sure they understand that you can't get better without change. And at the same time, you have to understand your people and your customers or your citizens don't like change. And it's this constant dichotomy going back and forth. So if people can just take a breath every now and then, ask, especially when they see sensational news, is this real journalism provided by you, Walt, for instance? Is this real journalism telling me the story? Or is this somebody just simply trying to divide and sensationalism and clicks? And if they could just guard against that, then I think communities will have free electricity. I think communities will have replenished water supplies. I think communities will have electrified and Wi-Fi'd entire downtowns where anybody, regardless of age or stage or income level, will have access to worldwide internet speed. And that's a more hopeful future that I'm a part of, and that I hope others will be too.
I mean, look at Allo Atomics.
Yep.
They're making reactors in a box that will fit on these data centers that won't suck from the grid.
Right.
And they'll actually put it back in there. It's that innovation that you're talking about that will actually make our society better. But right now, I think if people are scared.
Yeah.
Like they don't understand.
People are scared. I encourage them to just do more, read more. The AOCs and the Bernies of the world, God bless them. I understand that they have a purpose with her. But shutting down development on AI technology or shutting down the opening of new AI data centers is only going to leave room for the Chinese. And if the Chinese beat us to this next level of what we call, artificial general intelligence, where agents can learn from each other and then they can make their own decisions, which I know sounds scary. I'm looking at the camera. I know sounds scary. But in reality, it's a future that will be better for all of us, most of us, and then those that do experience job displacement, those that do lose their jobs, those that do fall on hard times, we as a community need to do our best to very quickly bring them back into the fold. Otherwise, we'll keep that political division. So your topic is not a light topic. I mean, defending the next 250 with the rapid change of all these technologies is going to take a lot of conversations, and I'm glad you started this one.
Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on Tech This Out, and we'll see what's next. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Call me back anytime.
Absolutely. You're welcome anytime. That's it for Tech This Out.